AI is everywhere, and if you're anything like me, you probably have one, and if not two, AI subscriptions quietly renewing every month. ChatGPT Plus is $20, Claude Pro is another $20, Google AI Pro is $19.99, so basically the same thing. But if they all cost roughly the same, how do you decide where your money should actually go? The obvious answer is to compare which company gives you the cheapest tokens, but that comparison is already wrong, because a $20 AI subscription is not a $20 bucket of AI tokens. It buys access to an app, a group of models, a set of tools, and usage limits that can change depending on the job that you give it. And the moment you move into an API, for example, a coding agent like Codex, Claude Code, or Antigravity, you may end up spending from a completely different wallet altogether. So in this video, I want to separate those wallets, open one real token receipt, and then build a simple system for deciding which AI belongs in which part of your work. Because the goal is not to find one AI that wins everything. The goal is to stop paying for overlapping tools without knowing what each one is actually for. So to do this, the first thing that we have to fix is the word usage. When you use ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, there are actually three different economic systems you might be touching. The first is the consumer subscription. That is ChatGPT Plus, Claude Pro, or Google AI Pro. You pay monthly for a bundle. It's models, features, storage, integrations, research tools, coding tools, and some level of access. What you usually do not receive is a clean statement that says, here are exactly how many API tokens to spend however you want. Instead, the providers describe rolling limits, feature limits, context limits, or usage that changes with the complexity of any task that you give it. The second system is the API, and that's where you see the familiar price per million input tokens and output tokens. You can often see cached input, reasoning, or thought tokens, tool calls, and service tiers as separate parts of the receipt altogether. And the third system is the harness itself. That is the layer around the model that plans the work, reads the files, calls tools, keeps context, retries, and may even switch models altogether. Codex, Claude Code, and Google Antigravity all live here. And sometimes the harness consumes usage included in your actual subscription. Sometimes it moves into credits, and sometimes an API key charges you separately altogether. So before we compare any prices, we need to know which wallet is actually open. This is where the word tokenomics becomes useful. The term has started appearing in research around agentic software and AI economics. One recent framework even defines AI tokenomics as the study of how tokens are generated, consumed, priced, allocated, and optimized. But there's one line in that research that matters more than the definition itself. Token expenditure and economic value are not the same thing. In other words, a model can use more tokens without producing more value, or it can use a more expensive model once and then save you from 3 failed attempts. So for this video, I'm using a simple definition. Tokenomics is the practice of tracing where AI usage went, what it costed, and whether the result was worth it. That'll give us a much better way to look at these subscriptions. So let's start with the monthly plans. All three can write, summarize, brainstorm, analyze files, and answer questions. If those are your only requirements, paying for all three creates a lot of overlap. So I would choose the home based on the surrounding workflow. ChatGPT makes sense as a home base if you want one broad productivity surface: projects, files, custom GPTs, deep research, plugins, and Codex or ChatGPT work that's tied into the same account. Claude makes a lot of sense when long-term document work or Claude Code is a recurring part of your week, and not just an experiment that you open once a month. And then finally, Gemini makes a lot of sense when the Google ecosystem is doing the real work for you: Gmail, Docs, Storage, Notebook LM, or Gemini Notebook, large context files, and Antigravity. So notice what I'm not saying here. I'm not saying ChatGPT is the better writer, Claude is the best coder, and Gemini is the best researcher, because those claims would change with the model, the prompt, and the benchmark, and they could change from 2 months from now. I'm saying that the subscription is more than just a model. You should buy the workflow you'll repeatedly use. The first rule is one home base. The second subscription has to earn its place by owning a specialist job. If you can't name that job in one sentence, you might be paying twice for the same category of help. So now we can look at the API prices, but we need to keep the comparison honest. So as of today, OpenAI's everyday GPT 5.6 Terra model lists at $2 per million input tokens and $12 per million output tokens. Claude Sonnet 5 is temporarily $2 for input and $10 for output through the end of August. Now, Anthropic says that moves to $3 and $15 starting September 1st, but who knows? Gemini 3.6 Flash lists at $1.50 for input and then $7.50 for output, including thought tokens. So let's say I invent one clean receipt: 100,000 input tokens and 10,000 output tokens with no tool, cache, retries, or long context premium. The arithmetic is simple. Terra would be 32 cents, a Sonnet at the temporary rate would be 30 cents, and Gemini Flash would be 22.5 cents. That makes Gemini look like the obvious winner here, except we have not established that the three models would produce the same quality. We also haven't established that they would use the same number of output tokens, or take the same number of attempts, or call the same tools. We have only priced identical quantities on 3 different rate cards, and tokens are not even a universal unit. Different tokenizers split the same material differently. Anthropic currently warns that the newest tokenizer can produce roughly 30% more tokens for the same text than earlier Claude models, depending on the workload. So price per million is just an ingredient. Cost per accepted result is the meal that we should be focused on. This is where my own experiment became very useful, because I gave Gemini 3.6 Flash one frozen YouTube planning job, same source material, same prompt, same 1,111 token input. Then I ran it with low thinking and high thinking. The low thinking answer was 858 visible output tokens. The high thinking answer was 882. Only 24 more visible tokens, but the calculated cost went from about 1.66 cents to 3.91 cents, more than twice as much. So what did I pay for here? The low thinking run reported about 1,131 thought tokens, but the high thinking run reported 4,108. That is nearly 3,000 additional thought tokens that never appeared in the answer that I read. And when I scored the 2 packages on the same editorial rubric, the score moved from 92 to 93. So that doesn't mean that high thinking is bad. The model did the extra work that I asked it to do. The problem was that this fairly straightforward planning job barely benefited from it. 1% to be exact. Now, on a difficult architecture decision, a subtle coding problem, or a high stakes analysis, that trade might be completely different. But this job gave me a much better operating rule, and it's this: start with the least expensive model and reasoning level that can pass your acceptance criteria. Escalate when that task earns it. The providers increasingly start to describe their own model families this way even. Inside OpenAI, Luna is positioned for high volume focus work such as routing, classification, extraction, support, and background automation. Terra is the everyday workhorse for reporting, document analysis, coding, and production tasks. And then Sol, for example, is the hardest ambiguous, advanced, or high-stakes work. Inside Claude Code, on the other hand, Anthropic recommends Haiku for quick mechanical tasks, Sonnet for a large majority of coding work, and Opus for hard debugging, architecture, or broad refactors. They even provide an Opus plan mode, which allows you to plan with Opus, then execute with Sonnet. And inside Gemini, Google describes Flash Lite as the fast everyday workhorse. Flash is the balance of speed and reasoning, and then Pro for complex math, coding, and deeper multimodal understanding. So this is the economic pattern I want viewers to see. You don't need to be using the strongest model sitting in every chair. You should be using the right model at the expensive decision points and a cheaper workhorse everywhere else. This becomes more important when we reach the harness. So a chat answer may be one inference. An agent can plan, inspect files, use a browser, run a command, read the result, critique the work, and retry. And one 2026 study followed 30 software tasks through an agentic framework. Code review alone averaged 59.4% of the token usage, and input tokens average 53.9% of the entire total. And that's not a universal law. It is one framework, one model, and 30 tasks. But it shows why the final answer is a poor receipt. Much of the spend can happen in repeated context and refinement. Claude Code, for example, makes this unusually easy. Now, Anthropic says that every turn includes the conversation so far, project context, and a new prompt. A long session can keep resending work from earlier in the conversation. And that's why /clear matters when you switch job, and /compact matters when you continue doing a log job, and then /cost matters when you are using API billing. Context management is token management. So now let's make the final distinction concrete. Codex is included across ChatGPT plans, and its usage is shared with ChatGPT Work. When flexible credits apply, actual consumption depends on input, cached input, and output tokens. OpenAI's current rate card also makes the model gap visible. Luna consumes far fewer credits than Terra, and then Terra far fewer than Sol. Claude Code is included with Claude Pro and Max, and that usage is shared with Claude Conversations. But if Claude Code is configured with an API key, it can charge the API count instead, so checking /status and /cost is not trivial. It tells you which wallet you're paying from. And then Google Antigravity uses a 2-tier system. You receive a baseline quota through the Google AI plan, and after that quota is exhausted, you can then allow AI credit overusage based on the selected model's standard API pricing and the complexity of the request. The model selector shows quota status, and then you can set overage to never or always. But here's one important correction. I would not describe Antigravity as an automatic bargain hunter that always routes to the cheapest model. The current documentation supports model selection, quota visibility, and overage control, but the user still owns the economic decision here. The harness gives you the leverage, but it can also create a longer receipt. So here's the system I would use today if I were reviewing my first AI budget. Firstly, choose one home base. Pick the subscription whose surrounding workflow you use every week, not the company that won the last benchmark that you saw. Secondly, name a specialist. Only keep a second subscription if it owns a recurring job with clear value. Claude Code could be that job, Google's integration in Notebook LM could be that job, Codex deep research or a custom ChatGPT workflow could be that job, and so on. And third, meter production work. When you automate a workflow, move beyond the app, or need irregular bursts of agent work, use the API or credits with receipts and spend controls. Don't treat another consumer subscription as a substitute for observable usage. And then fourth, route by difficulty. Use the fast model for extraction, classification, summaries, and mechanical work. Use the workhorse for normal production. Escalate to the deepest model of thinking level when the risk or ambiguity justifies it. And fifth, review the results, not only the receipt. Measure what the approved report costed you, what the accepted code change cost, and also what the finished research brief costed. Then you review the subscriptions monthly. That is tokenomics at the level of real personal workflow. ChatGPT Plus, Claude Pro, and Google AI Pro may all sit around $20, but those prices do not buy 3 interchangeable buckets of intelligence. They buy different products around the models, and the real economics only become visible when you separate the subscription, the API, and the harness. My Gemini experiment made that visible in just one request, and the answer barely changed, while almost 3,000 additional thought tokens pushed the cost to 2.36 times the low thinking run. The model did more work, but the task simply did not earn that work. So the question is not which AI has the cheapest tokens, it is which workflow is valuable enough to pay for, which model can complete it reliably, and which wallet is actually being charged. Choose one home base and then make the second subscription prove it has a specialist job. And when the work becomes automated or agentic, open the receipt, because the cheapest token is not automatically the cheapest workflow. And 3 $20 subscriptions are not automatically 3 times as useful. So if you like this kind of breakdown, drop a like below and subscribe because a lot more will be coming in the future. See ya.